Hey everyone. Tonight we step into a forest of ice and silence, where breath freezes before it leaves your lips and rifles jam from the cold. You won't hear cavalry charges or trumpets here, only the sudden roar of artillery splitting the fog, the grind of tanks choking on mud, and the sharp crack of men executed in the snow. This isn't about lines on a map or Hitler's grand gamble. It's about soldiers collapsing from hunger, whole convoys abandoned as steel beasts die in the woods, and Christmas hymns sung by men who knew they would never see home again. If you want unflinching stories of desperation, vengeance, and ghosts that linger in the Ardennes, hit like and subscribe, and in the comments, tell me, where are you watching from? And what winter memory still haunts you now? Steady yourself and follow me into the Bulge, Germany's last dying lunge. You are there, standing guard in the deep, hushed expanse of the Ardennes forest. The breath you draw in is sharp, cold, a needle of ice piercing your lungs, then exhaling in a thick, white plume that lingers before dissolving into the crisp winter air. It's a world of stark, muted colors, where evergreens wear a heavy mantle of snow, and the ground beneath your boots is a vast, brittle sheet. Every small movement, every shift of your weight, produces a distinct, almost musical crunch, a sound like snapping glass echoing through the profound silence. The wind, a relentless, unseen sculptor, slices through the thin wool of your sweater, finding every gap, every seam, stealing the warmth from your body. Your fingers, usually so agile, are stiff now, rigid and unresponsive, like stones shaped by ceaseless elements. You try to clench them, to bring back some sensation, but the effort is futile. The cold has claimed them, turning them into numb appendages, heavy and slow. You feel the chill creeping, seeping into your bones, a constant, low thrum of discomfort that settles deep within. This sector, you were told, was a quiet sector, a place where the war seemed to hold its breath, a temporary respite from the ceaseless fury of the front lines. But the earth beneath your worn boots, the very ground you stand upon, seems to contradict this promise. There's a subtle, almost imperceptible tremor, a faint vibration that travels up through the frozen soil, a whisper of distant energy. It's a feeling, more than a sound, a premonition that something is stirring in the vast, snow-covered quiet. And then, as if summoned by your growing unease, a low, guttural growl drifts through the dense fog. It's not the wind, nor the rustle of unseen creatures. It is the deep, mechanical hum of engines, a sound that conjures images of metal beasts, heavy and deliberate, crawling closer through the obscured landscape. The fog, a thick, swirling blanket, holds the sound, distorts it, makes it seem to come from everywhere and nowhere all at once. You strain your ears, trying to pinpoint its origin, but the world remains a hazy, ambiguous realm of white and gray. Nobody had truly believed the Germans would attack in winter. It seemed an act of utter desperation, a gamble against the very elements. The cold, the snow, the logistical nightmare. Surely, it was too much. But then, without warning, the night sky above you rips open, not with a silent tear, but with a deafening, blinding fury. The first shells descend, screaming their arrival, detonating with an earth-shattering roar that sends shockwaves through the frozen ground and through your very being. You blink, trying to clear your vision, trying to comprehend the sudden, terrifying blaze of explosions. For a fleeting, surreal moment, the snow-covered trees, the pristine white landscape, and the shrapnel arcing through the air glow with an unnatural, infernal red against the deepening dark. It is a silent, searing artwork of destruction. A brutal masterpiece painted across the canvas of the winter night. And in that moment, the quiet sector vanishes, swallowed by the roar, and you realize the true terror has just begun. The cold, once your only enemy, is now just a backdrop to the unfolding chaos. A silent witness to the sudden, horrifying reality of war. The air fills with the acrid, metallic tang of cordite, a suffocating presence that clings to everything. The German artillery, relentless and precise, slams into the ground for what feels like an eternity, a solid 90 minutes of uninterrupted fury. Each impact is a physical blow, a concussive wave that rattles your teeth and vibrates through your bones. The trenches, once a semblance of safety, are churned into chaotic pits of frozen earth, now mixed with dark, wet mud, and a horrifying, spreading crimson. The snow, once pristine, is stained and broken, scarred by the sheer force of the explosions. You are thrown, jostled like a doll, your body a mere plaything for the invisible forces unleashed around you. Men scream, their voices raw with terror and pain, lost in the infernal symphony of shelling and collapsing earth. Your ears ring, a high-pitched whine that drowns out all other sounds, leaving you disoriented, cut off from the world. Your throat burns, raw from the cordite and the dust, making every breath a shallow, painful gasp. You try to speak, to call out, but no words come, only a dry, rasping cough. Then, from within the swirling, obscuring fog, shapes begin to emerge, vague at first, like specters, then coalescing into the chilling reality of SS troops. Their white camouflage smocks making them seem like ghosts gliding through the snow. And with them, the grinding, inexorable advance of tanks, their massive treads tearing through the trees, snapping branches like dry twigs. The low growl you heard earlier is now a thunderous roar, a monstrous sound that signals their close proximity, their unstoppable intent. You raise your rifle, the cold metal biting into your gloved hands, and fire. The sharp crack of your weapon is almost lost in the greater din. But you keep firing, emptying the clip with desperate, frantic energy. You see them fall, but more appear, like an endless, dark tide. They keep coming, filling the gaps, their presence a relentless, crushing weight. The steel beasts follow, their cannons turning, seeking new targets, their engines coughing and roaring as they chew up the frozen earth. You reload, your numb fingers fumbling with the frozen ammunition, each movement agonizingly slow. To your right, you see figures break and run, their silhouettes fleeting against the explosions, their panic a contagious fear. To your left, a voice, high-pitched and broken, calls out for his mother, a sound of such profound vulnerability that it pierces through the fog of your own terror. The line, once a rigid boundary, shatters like thin ice under the weight of the assault. It doesn't break cleanly. It splinters, fragments, each piece scattering in its own desperate attempt to survive. In that moment, a chilling clarity settles over you. This is no longer a battle, a contest of strategy or strength. this is something far more primal, far more terrifying. This is survival. Every instinct, every fiber of your being screams at you to find cover, to escape, to simply keep breathing. The world has narrowed to this singular, desperate purpose, and the cold, once a looming threat, now feels like a silent, indifferent witness to the unfolding chaos. A frigid embrace that promises to claim all who falter. The wind whispers through the shattered trees, a mournful dirge, as the last vestiges of hope seem to evaporate with the warmth from your body. The relentless, numbing cold is a constant companion now, pressing down on you with a palpable weight. You are captured, herded with hundreds of others, a silent, shuffling mass of men, into a vast, snow-covered field. The white expanse seems to stretch endlessly, unbroken save for the dark figures of your captors and the stark, skeletal trees that line the distant perimeter. Each breath you take still smokes white, a visible testament to the frigid air, and the silence, punctuated only by the scuff of boots on snow, is heavy, suffocating. Then, without warning, the brutal staccato sound of machine guns shatters the stillness. The air fills with the whiplash crack of gunfire, a terrible symphony of death. Bodies collapse in heaps, a macabre landscape forming in the pristine snow. Each fall a sickening thud. The warm, crimson blood, a stark contrast to the white canvas, blooms instantly, steaming against the frost, creating ephemeral clouds that rise and vanish into the cold air. The sheer speed of it, the sudden, indiscriminate violence, leaves no room for thought, only a primal, overwhelming instinct. You drop. Your body, responding without conscious command, crumples to the ground, your face pressed hard into the unforgiving ice. The shock of the cold against your skin is immediate, a searing burn that momentarily eclipses the terror. You lie still, utterly motionless, playing dead, every muscle screaming for release, yet frozen by the horrific scene unfolding around you. Your breath hitches in your chest, shallow and rapid, your heart a frantic drum against your ribs. Above you, the heavy, rhythmic thud of boots tramples past your skull, so close you can feel the vibrations in the frozen earth beneath your cheek. The sounds of agony, of men gasping their last, are terrifyingly close, each one a stark reminder of your own precarious existence. The machine guns fall silent, leaving an echoing void in the air. The last moans, faint and fading, die away, swallowed by the vast, indifferent silence of the snow. All that remains is the soft, whispering hiss of the wind through the tall pine trees, a sound that seems to mourn the lives just extinguished. You lie there, for what feels like an eternity, your body numb, your mind a whirlwind of fragmented images and chilling sounds. The fear is a physical entity, a cold, constricting band around your chest. A rumor, like a malicious whisper carried on the wind, begins to spread. It ripples through the few survivors, a chilling truth that travels faster than any bullet. The SS are executing prisoners. It is not just the heat of battle, not just the chaotic, desperate surge. This is calculated, cold-blooded murder. The realization sinks in, a heavy, bitter stone in your gut. Mercy, compassion. The unspoken rules of warfare, they have evaporated here, dissolved into the freezing air like the breath from your lips. From this moment on, the meaning of the war changes. It is no longer just about survival, about lines on a map or strategic objectives. It transforms into something far more personal, far more primal. It becomes about vengeance. The image of the fallen, the steaming blood on the snow, the cold indifference of the machine guns, it sears itself into your memory. A burning ember of hatred that will fuel every future action. The world has shed its thin veneer of civility, revealing a brutal, unforgiving reality where only the strong, and perhaps the ruthless, will endure. And the quiet cold, once an oppressive adversary, now seems to hold the silent promise of retribution, a vast, waiting canvas for the bitter justice yet to be meted out. As you cling to the shadows, the brutal truth of this winter war settles around you, heavy as the snow. You begin to understand the enemy, not as a monolithic entity, but as a fractured mosaic of conviction and desperation. On one side, you hear the fervent, almost mystical belief of the SS soldiers. They write home, if they can, their words infused with a fanatical zeal, comparing this audacious attack to the legendary stand of 300 Spartans. For them, this isn't just a battle. It's a sacred sacrifice, a final, glorious effort to snatch victory from the jaws of defeat. An almost spiritual quest for a dying empire. Their eyes, when you glimpse them, hold a burning intensity, a conviction that borders on madness, yet fuels an unwavering resolve. Yet, you also discern the bitter murmurs among the regular Wehrmacht men. Their voices low, devoid of the SS's fervent patriotism. You hear them speak in hushed tones, the words laced with a weary cynicism. 12 days to Antwerp, or the war is lost. It's a chillingly pragmatic assessment, a stark contrast to the SS's heroic narratives. For these soldiers, the grand gambles are just that, gambles, with their lives as the stakes. They understand the brutal arithmetic of logistics, the unforgiving nature of the winter, and the dwindling resources of a nation stretched to its breaking point. They chew crusts of frozen bread in silence, their faces hollowed by hunger and fatigue, their eyes holding a deep, profound weariness that speaks volumes more than any shouted slogan. There are those who still chant, sometimes in a desperate chorus, "Victory or Siberia," a stark choice reflecting the existential threat they face. But many you see are lice-ridden, their uniforms ragged, their faces etched with profound exhaustion. These are the men who have known endless retreats, who have seen the vast, unforgiving expanses of the Eastern Front, who have looted their own countrymen during the chaotic withdrawal from France, a desperate act born of their own privation. Their hollow eyes hold the ghosts of past failures, the weight of a war that has consumed so much. And yet, despite the despair, despite the internal fractures, a unifying thread of resolve remains. The terrifying prospect of Allied forces crossing into their homeland, of the war being fought on German soil, hardens their grip on their rifles. It is a primal fear, a fierce protectiveness that transcends ideology and fatigue. It is the thought of their homes, their families, their very way of life under threat that steels their nerve, forging a fragile unity in the face of inevitable collapse. You can see it in their grim faces, in the determined set of their jaws. A deep-seated resolve born not of fanaticism, but of desperation. On the eve of this battle, in the tense hours before the first shells fell, everyone, from the highest general to the lowest infantryman, knew the truth. This was Germany's final throw of the dice. A last, desperate gamble in a game they were already losing. The air itself seemed charged with this understanding, a heavy, fatalistic energy that hung over the frozen landscape. It was a silence filled with unspoken prayers, with grim acceptance, and with the faint, persistent whisper of a dying hope. You feel it now, the echoes of that desperation, carried on the frigid wind, a grim reminder of the immense stakes that define this silent, unforgiving winter. You are now part of the 101st Airborne, surrounded, dug deep into the frozen streets and cellars of Bastogne. The town, once a quiet crossroads, is now an island in a sea of German steel and snow. The biting cold, a relentless adversary, seeps through the stone walls, through your clothes, a constant, gnawing presence. The ground beneath you, hard as granite, offers little comfort or warmth. Every breath you take is a shallow, visible cloud, testament to the frigid air that fills these confined spaces. Ammunition dwindles, each bullet a precious commodity, its weight felt acutely as you check your magazines. Rations shrink, reduced to crumbs, a meager existence that leaves your stomach aching with a constant, hollow hunger. The wounded lie stacked in cellars, their moans a low, continuous counterpoint to the distant rumble of artillery. There are so many of them, their faces pale and drawn, their bodies ravaged not only by shrapnel and bullets, but by the insidious creeping frostbite. You do what you can, share what little you have, but the resources are stretched thin, almost to the breaking point. Then, through the biting wind, a demand arrives from the German lines, a call for surrender. It is direct, uncompromising, and seems to hang in the air like a taunt. But General McAuliffe, his resolve as solid as the frozen earth, replies with a single, defiant word: nuts. The message ripples through your ranks, a spark of dark humor in the suffocating gloom. You find yourself laughing bitterly in the dark, a hoarse, ragged sound that mingles with the smell of old blood, mildew, and the stale air of the cellar. It's a laugh born of desperation, a refusal to break, a grim acknowledgement of the impossible situation you find yourself in. Each day stretches out before you like an entire winter, an endless expanse of cold, hunger, and unrelenting siege. The hours blur into a timeless struggle, marked only by the shifting light through the cracks and the distant roar of combat. You live now not on food or warmth, but on the fragile thread of hope, the desperate yearning for resupply. It is the only thing that sustains you, the only thing that keeps the gnawing despair at bay. You clutch onto it, this slender thread, as you might clutch a blanket in the freezing night. Above, in the brief moments of rest, your dreams are filled with the drone of C-47 transport planes, their engines a hopeful promise against the vast, empty sky. You imagine them, a silver armada, breaking through the clouds, their cargo a lifeline of food and ammunition, a desperate plea answered. Below, in the waking nightmare, you cling to every crossroads, every street, every inch of frozen ground. Each position is a battleground, a testament to your stubborn refusal to yield. You defend them with fierce, unwavering determination, knowing that every foot of ground given means another step towards the inevitable. The wind howls outside, a mournful song that carries the sounds of distant gunfire and the sharp, sudden bark of mortars. It is a lonely, isolated existence. A battle waged not only against the enemy, but against the elements, against hunger, against the creeping tendrils of despair. Bastogne becomes a microcosm of the entire war. A frozen crucible where the human spirit is tested to its absolute limits, and where the hope of resupply is the brightest star in a perpetually dark sky. You feel the cold in your bones, the hunger in your gut, and the grim resolve in your heart, a silent, unyielding defiance against the icy embrace of fate. The woods around you are becoming a graveyard for the iron beasts of war, a testament to the brutal inefficiency of winter. You witness the king tiger, a magnificent 72-ton leviathan of steel, roaring its defiance, its engine a deep, resonant rumble that promises unstoppable power. Yet, its very might becomes its undoing. Bridges, fragile spans over icy streams, collapse under its immense weight, sending it crashing into the frigid waters below. Roads, once solid, transform into treacherous bogs, swallowing its massive tracks, trapping it in the relentless, sucking mud. It gulps fuel by the barrel, a monstrous thirst that cannot be slaked in this frozen wilderness. Its engines, once powerful and steady, begin to cough, to sputter, protesting the cold, the strain, the inadequate fuel. Then, with a final, choked sigh, they die in silence, leaving the colossal tank a motionless, impotent hulk amidst the trees. Its crew, frustrated and exposed, abandon their metallic monster in the muck, huddling in the snow, knowing that from the vast, indifferent sky, they are now nothing more than vulnerable targets, small specks against the white. The one-lane roads, vital arteries for any advance, become clogged with a grim collection of wrecks, abandoned tanks, broken-down trucks, supply vehicles stuck fast in the deep snow or mire. It is a scene of utter chaos and frustration. Officers scream, their voices raw with exasperation, trying to restore order, to push the immobilized convoys forward. Men curse, their breath frosting in the air, their tempers as frozen and brittle as the landscape around them. The sheer futility of it all hangs heavy in the air, a thick, suffocating despair. The great German offensive, built on speed and power, is choking on its own logistics, dying a slow, ignominious death in the silent, unforgiving woods. You share a single loaf of bread among 10 men, breaking off meager pieces, each crumb a precious sustenance. The texture is coarse, the taste bland, but it is enough to stave off the worst of the gnawing hunger, if only for a few hours. The cold continues its insidious work, claiming parts of you, little by little. Your toes, despite the thickest socks, begin to blacken with frostbite, a creeping numbness that signals the irreversible damage. You try to rub them, to bring back feeling, but the sensation is gone, replaced by an unsettling, icy emptiness. Monsters and men both die here, in this brutal landscape. Not always from the sudden violence of bullets or the searing heat of explosions. They die from hunger, from the relentless, soul-crushing cold, and from the profound, inescapable sense of futility. The frozen woods hold them, silent and still, a testament to the unforgiving nature of this war, a conflict where the elements themselves are the most potent adversaries. The wind whispers through the branches, a mournful lament for the fallen, both steel and flesh, as the vast, indifferent expanse of winter claims its terrible toll. Then, a shift, a subtle, almost imperceptible change in the oppressive, gray ceiling of the sky. The clouds, for days a thick, unbroken blanket, begin to break apart, parting slowly like a vast, celestial curtain. A pale, hesitant light spills onto the snow-covered landscape, a soft, ethereal glow that brings with it a surge of unexpected, fragile hope. And with that light, from above, comes a sound, a deep, resonant roar that is not the growl of tanks, but something else entirely, something utterly familiar and immensely comforting. It is the roar of engines, American engines. P-47, Thunderbolts, and British Typhoons, angels of retribution, dive through the newly opened sky, their forms sleek and purposeful against the pale light. Rockets scream from their wings, a terrifying, beautiful arc of fire, streaking towards the German convoys below. The impact is immediate, devastating. The convoys explode into firestorms, mushroom clouds of smoke and flame rising against the white snow. A brutal confirmation of the air power that has finally arrived. The sound is immense, overwhelming. Yet it is a sound of salvation. You dive into ditches, pressing yourself against the frozen earth, your heart hammering against your ribs with a frantic, desperate rhythm. The shadows of the aircraft skim the trees above you, their immense wings casting fleeting, dark shapes across the snow. You feel the ground tremble with the force of the explosions, the concussive waves washing over you. But this time, there is a strange, fierce joy mingled with the terror. You know these planes. You know their purpose. And their presence transforms the landscape of fear into a theater of vengeance. The Germans, in their desperation, have a name for them, Jabos, a shorthand for Jagdbomber, fighter bombers. And from this moment on, with the sky clear, anything that moves on the ground, any vehicle, any concentration of troops is a target. The hunters have become the hunted, and the roles have reversed with the turning of the weather. The air, once a suffocating blanket, is now an arena of swift, devastating justice. Above Bastogne, a sight that brings tears to your frost-bitten eyes, unfolds like a miracle. Parachutes, hundreds of them, bloom like white flowers against the pale blue sky. They drift slowly, majestically, carrying bundles of food, desperately needed ammunition, and medical supplies. It is a lifeline, a tangible sign that the world has not forgotten you, that help is truly on its way. The sight fills your chest with a warmth that has nothing to do with the sun, a profound relief that washes over the numbing cold. Hope, once a flickering ember, shifts and flares into a brilliant, undeniable flame. The Allies rise with the sky, their power unleashed, their presence a promise of turning tides. And the Germans, who had gambled everything on the winter weather, sink into a deepening despair, their desperate offensive crumbling under the relentless assault from above. The sound of engines, once a source of dread, is now a symphony of salvation, a powerful anthem carried on the wind, proclaiming that the long, dark night of the siege is finally, irrevocably, breaking. The pale light on the snow is not just a sign of a new day, but of a renewed battle, one that you now stand a chance of winning. The turning point has arrived, ushered in by the roar of aircraft and the indomitable will of one man. You hear the whispers, then the shouts of General Patton. He is a force of nature, a man who knows no surrender to the elements. He has wheeled his entire Third Army north, a staggering feat, in mere days, defying the winter, defying the odds. You imagine the scene: thousands of vehicles, endless columns of men, carving their way through the frozen roads, breaking the stranglehold of ice and snow with sheer, unyielding determination. Bridges, critical arteries of movement, are often blown, shattered by the retreating enemy, leaving gaping chasms over icy rivers. But Patton does not halt. He builds new ones, his engineers working tirelessly, in the brutal cold, under fire, to span the gaps, to keep the relentless advance moving forward. Routes that are clogged with the abandoned wrecks of the German offensive, or buried deep under fresh snow, do not deter him. He plows straight through, his tanks and bulldozers clearing a path, ignoring the obstacles, his gaze fixed firmly on the objective. There is an almost mythical quality to his drive, a momentum that seems to defy all natural and man-made barriers. Then, on December 26th, a day etched forever in the annals of memory, the rumble begins. It is the deep, familiar sound of American Shermans, powerful and resolute, rolling into Bastogne. The sight is overwhelming, a visceral shock of relief that washes away the weeks of dread and cold. Soldiers cheer, their voices hoarse, tears streaming down their faces, freezing on their cheeks in the frigid air. They are not just cheering for the tanks, for the new arrivals. They are cheering for life, for the end of the siege, for the very act of survival. No one dares to speak the word victory yet. It feels too grand, too audacious, too far away. Instead, they whisper, just whisper, words of profound, humble gratitude. We're still alive. It is a simple truth, a fragile, hard-won reality. The ultimate triumph in a war that has demanded so much. The tension that has been a constant companion, a tightening band around your chest, begins to loosen, replaced by a quiet, profound sense of release. You feel it in the air, a perceptible shift from the suffocating dread to a cautious, almost unbelievable, hope. Across the lines, you hear the frantic, desperate commands of Hitler himself. Bastogne, once just a small, unremarkable town, has become a symbol, an obsession. He declares it must be taken, at any cost. Every ounce of remaining German might is thrown against the determined American defenders, wave after wave of desperate assaults. But each one dies, melting away under a hail of shells, shattered by the wings of the vengeful aircraft above. Every cost is wasted, every life sacrificed for a lost cause. Patton's turn through the ice, his seemingly impossible drive, has broken the back of the German offensive. The relentless cold, which they had hoped would be their ally, has become a relentless foe, making every advance agonizing, every retreat perilous. The wind, once a harbinger of despair, now whispers of a different future, a future where the tide has irrevocably turned. You feel the shift, the slow, steady turning of the great wheel of war, and in that moment, Bastogne, once a desperate stronghold, becomes a beacon of defiant endurance, a symbol that even in the deepest winter, hope can find a way to bloom. The bitter irony of Christmas in this crucible of war settles heavily over the frozen landscape. At Celles, the farthest German spearhead, the mighty advance finally grinds to a halt. They are out of gas, their engines coughing their last, their momentum utterly spent. They are out of shells, their cannons now silent, impotent tubes. They are out of breath, the men exhausted, their spirits broken, their desperate gamble having failed. The vision of Antwerp, the grand prize, vanishes like smoke in the frigid air, replaced by the grim reality of utter defeat. You hear stories of Piper, the SS commander, abandoning his armored column at L'Église, a scene of desperate chaos. His once proud tanks, the King Tigers and Panthers, now stand like silent, rusted monuments in the snow, out of fuel, their crews having fled. Some SS men, in a desperate bid to escape, attempt to swim the icy river, their bodies quickly succumbing to the brutal cold, cut down midstream by waiting American fire. The river, once a natural barrier, becomes a watery grave, its surface reflecting the grim, unforgiving reality of a broken offensive. Belgian villagers, caught in the inferno, watch their homes burn, the flames a stark, terrible beauty against the endless white. Their lives, once simple and peaceful, are shattered by the passing storm of war. And through the devastation, you hear a macabre sound. Germans, their voices strained but still resonant, singing Silent Night, a Christmas hymn, while clutching stolen bottles, their brief moment of drunken solace a chilling contrast to the destruction around them. It is a scene of profound sorrow, of humanity twisted by the relentless pressures of conflict. On the battlefield, in the grim aftermath, a terrible justice is exacted. Americans, fueled by the memory of Malmedy, by the whispers of executed prisoners, carry out their own brutal retribution. SS prisoners, their arrogance replaced by terror, are shot on the spot. Mercy, once a casualty of the freezing field, remains absent. It is a dark stain on the soul of the war, a testament to the savagery that absolute desperation can unleash. A grim accounting for the horrors witnessed. Allied counterattacks, now relentless and coordinated, begin to flatten the Bulge, slowly, painstakingly pushing back the German lines. The desperate German operations, Base Plate and Nordwind, intended to turn the tide, crumble into ignominious failure. Their objectives never met, their forces decimated. The vast, frozen landscape, once the stage for a dramatic offensive, becomes a canvas for the slow, grinding defeat of a desperate army. That Christmas, the snow does not glow with the gentle warmth of holiday cheer, but with a searing, infernal red, reflecting the fires of destruction and the blood spilled on its pristine surface. Hope, once kindled by the sight of planes and the arrival of Patton, now burns away with the smoke from the ruined villages, replaced by a grim, weary determination to see this brutal, unforgiving winter war to its bitter end. The silence that follows the fighting is not peaceful, but heavy, laden with the weight of loss, a profound testament to a Christmas spent in the crucible of absolute human desperation. The front resets, slowly, painfully. The lines on the map return to something resembling their previous configuration, as if the massive, desperate lunge had never happened. But the men, those who survived, do not reset. You feel it in your very bones. The irreversible changes wrought by the Arctic cold, the searing terror, the constant gnawing hunger, and the witnessing of unspeakable acts. Germany loses an estimated 100,000 soldiers, a staggering, irreplaceable toll. America, too, pays a heavy price. with approximately 75,000 casualties. But only one side, the Allies, possesses the vast industrial might and manpower to replace those losses. The once mighty King Tigers, the grandiose slogans of victory, the desperate dreams of capturing Antwerp, they are all left behind, rusting in the silent, snow-covered woods like prehistoric carcasses. These metallic giants, once symbols of power, are now mere monuments to futility, slowly succumbing to the elements, their grand purpose forgotten. Their silence is profound, a stark contrast to the roaring chaos they once unleashed. Their presence a haunting reminder of ambition, crushed by the unforgiving realities of war. You trudge through the snow, the deep drifts now less an obstacle, more a familiar companion. Your stomach is a hollow cavern, a persistent ache that has become a part of you. Your eyes burn from the ceaseless wind, the relentless glare of the snow, and the unshed tears of exhaustion and grief. You look around at the vast, desolate landscape, wondering if home still exists, if the world you knew before this frozen hell still holds a place for you. The memory of warmth, of laughter, of simple comforts feels distant, almost unreal, like a faint echo from another lifetime. Comrades, friends, faces you knew and fought alongside, lie frozen in the snow, their eyes wide, unseeing, forever fixed on the gray sky. They guard their defeat, their sacrifice, like silent statues carved in ice, eternal sentinels of a brutal end. Their stillness is a profound contrast to the vibrant lives they once lived, a chilling tableau of the war's ultimate cost. You pass them, a lump in your throat, a silent prayer forming on your lips, knowing that a piece of you, too, remains frozen with them. Above, the sky is quiet again. The planes have gone. The artillery has ceased its roar, and the wind whispers its ancient, mournful song through the skeletal trees. But you know that the quiet is deceptive. Hope, in its purest, most innocent form, is gone, replaced by a hardened resolve, a weary understanding of the world's brutal truths. The Battle of the Bulge did not save Germany. It merely prolonged the inevitable, extinguishing the last flicker of their desperate gamble. Instead, it left behind something far more enduring, far more haunting. It left ghosts. Ghosts that march with the survivors, silent companions in the long journey home. Their presence a constant, chilling reminder of the cold, the hunger, the terror, and the profound, indelible scars etched into the winter landscape and into the very souls of those who endured it. And perhaps, somewhere in the whispers of the Ardennes wind, their stories still drift, carried through the pines, a gentle, eternal lament for a war fought in the frozen heart of winter. As I reflect upon the vast tapestry of human ingenuity, particularly within the realm of engineering, I often find myself drawn to those peculiar detours, the paths less traveled, the inventions that seem to dance on the edge of genius and eccentricity. It is in this spirit that I begin our quiet exploration tonight, delving into the long and fascinating tradition of odd and experimental armored vehicles. From the earliest imaginative sketches of a genius like Leonardo da Vinci, who, centuries ago, envisioned a covered, human-powered war machine that spun in circles, not unlike an early tank, to the sophisticated, yet often outlandish, prototypes born from the fervent pressures of the Cold War. The story of tank design has always been a compelling blend of stark practicality and wild ambition. I find it quite profound to consider the forces that drive such innovation. Often, it was an overwhelming sense of desperation, a grim necessity born from the crucible of conflict, that spurred engineers and strategists to think beyond conventional wisdom. Imagine the quiet, late-night hours in drafting rooms, the frantic calculations, the endless debates, all fueled by the urgent need to protect their soldiers, to break through an enemy's defenses, or to outmaneuver a formidable adversary. This desperation could lead to truly radical ideas, pushing the boundaries of what was thought possible, or sometimes even sensible. But it wasn't just the harsh demands of war that shaped these incredible machines. There was also the undeniable spark of human creativity, that intrinsic desire to solve problems in novel ways, to build something entirely new, something that had never been seen before. I picture the minds, brimming with innovative concepts, sketching out designs on crumpled paper, envisioning a future battlefield dominated by their unique creation. This creative drive, unburdened by past failures or even present limitations, allowed for a beautiful, sometimes bewildering, array of designs to emerge from the drawing board. It's a testament to the human spirit's capacity to dream, even in the most grim of circumstances. And then, of course, there was the subtle, yet powerful, influence of political pressure. Governments, eager to demonstrate technological superiority or to reassure their populations, would often commission projects that were perhaps more ambitious than practical. I can almost hear the hushed conversations in high-level meetings, the promises of game-changing weaponry, the desire to project an image of formidable strength. These political currents could propel funding into projects that, while fascinating, might never truly find their place on the battlefield. It's a delicate interplay of power, prestige, and the sometimes unrealistic expectations of what technology can achieve. So, as we settle deeper into our story, I want you to hold these driving forces in your mind: the grim desperation of war, the soaring flights of human creativity, and the intricate dance of political ambition. These are the underlying currents that shape the incredible, and sometimes incredibly strange, armored vehicles we are about to explore. Each one, a steel-clad reflection of its time, its challenges, and the minds that dared to dream it into being. They set the stage for our quiet examination of 5 of the weirdest tanks ever built. Machines that tell a much deeper story than their unusual appearances might suggest. Let us gently turn the page to our first curious creation. Our first stop on this journey back through the peculiar side of tank history takes us to Sweden, in the quiet, reflective years following the Second World War. The echoes of conflict still resonated across Europe, and nations like Sweden, committed to maintaining their neutrality yet acutely aware of the shifting geopolitical landscape, embarked on ambitious military modernization projects. It was in this climate of cautious innovation that a rather unique armored vehicle emerged, a design that I find particularly charming in its earnest, if somewhat flawed. Ambition, the Strip 74. I imagine the engineers, perhaps with a slight furrow in their brows, looking at the initial schematics. Their task was to update an older, more established design. The Strem 42, a tank that had served its purpose but was now considered somewhat outdated in the face of rapidly advancing tank technology. The core idea was to give it a much-needed punch, to arm it with a more powerful main gun, something truly formidable. They decided upon a potent 75mm gun, a weapon designed to deliver a significant impact on any potential adversary. This decision, while strategically sound, fundamentally reshaped the character of the old M42. Picture, if you will, the challenge of integrating such a substantial weapon into an existing, relatively modest chassis. The Striv M42 was not designed for such a heavy load, especially one that would extend so prominently from its turret. To accommodate this new, more powerful gun, the turret itself had to be redesigned, making it considerably taller and, perhaps more critically, narrower than its predecessor. I can almost visualize the blueprints, the careful calculations, the compromises made to achieve this newfound firepower. The result was a tank that, to my eyes, possessed a rather distinctive silhouette. It was undeniably narrow, a design choice perhaps made for navigating the specific terrain of Sweden, for threading through forest paths or urban streets with a certain agility. But this narrowness, when combined with its surprising height, created an inherent paradox, a delicate balance that was, in truth, quite precarious. I can almost hear the low thud and metallic groan as the powerful 75mm gun, a formidable weapon for its time, would unleash its fury. Picture, if you will, the recoil, a violent shove against the very structure of the tank. And instead of merely absorbing this shock, this machine, this Sturv 74 would respond with a disconcerting sway, a rocking motion that sent shivers through its steel frame. It was a sideways dance, an unsettling shimmy that made it feel almost alive, yet unnervingly vulnerable. I can only imagine the experience for the crew within, the clatter of loose equipment, the shifting of their own bodies, as their carefully aimed shot was followed by this rather dramatic and unsettling lurch. It must have been a peculiar sensation, to feel your entire mobile fortress sway like a boat upon an unseen wave after every powerful discharge. It's no wonder, then, that this tank earned itself a rather unceremonious nickname among those who operated it, senseless. I find a certain humor in this, a colloquial expression of frustration and perhaps a touch of affection for a machine that, despite its quirks, was built with earnest intent. Despite its strong firepower, which was indeed a significant upgrade, the Striv E74 suffered from other limitations. Its armor, while adequate for its time, was relatively weak by evolving standards, particularly when compared to the heavier, more robust designs emerging from other nations. This made it a somewhat vulnerable target, a glass cannon, if you will. The engineers had traded protection for offensive capability, a common dilemma in military design. Ultimately, the Striv 74, for all its unique characteristics and the quiet efforts that went into its creation, never saw actual combat. It remained a testament to Swedish ingenuity and resourcefulness in a period of change. A gentle reminder that even the most well-intentioned designs can sometimes have their peculiar flaws. Its story is a whisper of a time when nations sought to rearm and redefine their defenses, often with limited resources and a great deal of creative spirit. From the structured, albeit quirky, innovation of post-war Sweden, I now invite you to journey with me to a truly remarkable chapter in improvisational military engineering. One born from a profound sense of isolation and desperate ingenuity. Our destination is New Zealand during the tumultuous early years of World War II, a time when the world was gripped by fear, and the distant Pacific seemed to draw closer with each passing day. The story of the Bob Semple tank is, to my mind, less about a successful military design and more about the indomitable spirit of a nation facing an existential threat with whatever resources it could muster. Picture the scene 1940. Britain, the traditional supplier of military hardware to its Commonwealth allies, was fighting for its very survival. The fall of France had sent shockwaves across the globe, and the looming threat of a Japanese invasion loomed large over the Pacific. New Zealand, a relatively small nation with a proud military tradition, suddenly found itself in a precarious position, virtually defenseless against modern armored assault. There were no tanks, or at least none readily available. What do you do when the traditional supply lines are severed and the wolf is at the door? You innovate. You make do. You build your own. And so enters the figure of Robert Bob Semple, the New Zealand Minister of Public Works. I imagine him, a man of practical mind and unwavering resolve, looking at the resources at hand. They had tractors, sturdy, civilian Caterpillar D8 crawler tractors, workhorses of the agricultural fields and construction sites. And they had corrugated iron, a common building material. With these humble components, and without the luxury of elaborate blueprints or advanced metallurgical factories, the Bob Semple tank was born. It was, in essence, a large, armored box, bolted onto a tractor chassis. I can almost see the workshops, perhaps dimly lit, bustling with a sense of urgent purpose. Welders' sparks would have flown, hammers would have clanged, as men worked tirelessly, transforming farm equipment into a crude instrument of war. The corrugated iron, typically used for roofing and sheds, was repurposed as its primary armor, a thin skin against potential enemy fire. While it might sound almost comical in retrospect, I think we must appreciate the sheer determination behind this choice. It was a material they had. It was something they could work with, and it provided some level of protection, however minimal. It was a tangible act of defiance against a terrifying threat. The tank was armed, not with a single, powerful cannon, but with 6 Bren light machine guns. I imagine them strategically placed, one at the front, others on the sides, and even one mounted on the roof, perhaps allowing for some degree of all-around defensive fire. It was a machine designed for quantity of fire, for a desperate last stand, rather than precision assault. When the Bob Semple tank was finally unveiled, it was met with a rather predictable wave of ridicule. Photographs of the lumbering, corrugated-clad machine circulated, and its poor performance during trials became the subject of much mirth and even outright mockery. I can envision the skeptics, perhaps shaking their heads at its ungainly appearance, its slow speed, and its rather obvious vulnerabilities. It was a tank that looked exactly like what it was, a hastily assembled, improvised vehicle. Yet, beneath the surface of this ridicule, I believe it truly symbolized New Zealand's desperate ingenuity. It was a powerful, if visual, statement of self-reliance. And how did Bob Semple himself respond to the criticism with a frankness that I deeply admire? He is famously quoted as saying, with an air of challenge, "I don't see anyone else coming up with better ideas." To me, this simple sentence encapsulates the entire spirit of the project. It wasn't about building the best tank in the world. It was about building a tank, any tank. When no other options existed, it was a reflection of the national resolve, a quiet refusal to surrender to despair. Though it too, like our Swedish friend, never saw combat beyond the training fields. The Bob Semple tank stands as a powerful, if eccentric, monument to innovation born from desperation. A true testament to the idea that sometimes the only way forward is to build with what you have, and to do so with unwavering spirit. Its image might evoke a gentle smile, But its story, I believe, deserves our profound respect. As our quiet journey through the history of unusual armored vehicles continues, I now invite you to cross the vast expanse of the Pacific and Atlantic, to the bustling, industrial heart of the United States in the mid-1940s. Here, during the latter, intense stages of World War II, a different kind of desperation and ambition took hold, giving birth to a truly colossal machine, the American T-28 Super Heavy tank. This was not an improvisation born from scarcity, but rather an overengineered marvel, designed for a specific, immense challenge, a testament to the sheer scale of American wartime production and planning. Imagine the mood in 1944. The Allied forces were pushing relentlessly across Europe, but they were encountering formidable resistance. One of the most significant obstacles envisioned by the strategists was the Siegfried Line, a vast, heavily fortified defensive system stretching along Germany's western border. This was no ordinary trench line. It was a labyrinth of bunkers, dragon's teeth, and anti-tank obstacles, designed to be virtually impregnable. The conventional tanks of the era, powerful as they were, might struggle to punch through such an entrenched defense without incurring horrific casualties. And so, the vision for the T-28 began to take shape. I can almost picture the strategists and engineers poring over maps of the Siegfried Line, their faces grim, contemplating the sheer destructive force needed to overcome such an obstacle. They needed a tank that wasn't just big. They needed a monster, a moving fortress capable of shrugging off enemy fire while delivering devastating blows of its own. The specifications began to grow, each number more immense than the last. The result was a vehicle of truly staggering proportions, a leviathan of steel and power, weighing in at an astonishing 95 to 100 tons. To put that into perspective, that's roughly the weight of an entire blue whale. This immense weight was primarily due to its incredibly thick armor, designed to be impervious to the most powerful anti-tank weapons of the era. I imagine the satisfying thud of a shell against such a behemoth, the sound barely registering within its armored shell, a testament to the layers of steel protecting its precious crew. It was built, quite literally, to smash through fortifications. And what an instrument of smashing it carried. Its main armament was a formidable 105mm gun, a weapon of immense power, capable of firing high explosive shells that could tear apart concrete bunkers and armor-piercing rounds that could penetrate even the thickest steel. I envision the sheer concussive force of that gun firing, the ground shaking, the air vibrating as it delivered its destructive payload. However, as with many designs driven by a singular, immense purpose, the T-28 came with its own set of profound limitations. Its very size and weight, its greatest strengths in battle, became its most significant weaknesses in the logistical reality of war. I can almost hear the sighs of exasperation from the logistics officers. How do you move a 100-ton tank across a landscape crisscrossed with rivers and fragile roads? It was simply too heavy for most bridges, meaning that every river crossing would require a specialized, time-consuming engineering effort. Roads, too, would crumble under its immense mass, rendering them impassable for other vehicles. Its sheer footprint was a problem. To distribute its weight, it actually featured 4 sets of tracks, 2 on each side, though the outer 2 could be detached for transport. And then there was its speed, or rather, its profound lack thereof. This metallic titan crawled along at a maximum speed of only 8 miles per hour. I imagine the exasperated drivers, pushing the powerful engine to its limits, yet barely managing a brisk jog's pace. This made it not just slow, but strategically inflexible, unable to respond quickly to changing battlefield conditions or cover significant distances in a timely manner. The T-28 was a testament to overengineering, a magnificent solution to a problem that, perhaps mercifully, never fully materialized in the way anticipated. Only 2 prototypes were ever built. As fate would have it, the war in Europe ended before this colossal machine could ever be deployed against the Siegfried Line. The threat it was specifically designed to counter no longer existed, rendering its immense power and specialized design redundant. It remained an example of military foresight, certainly, but also a poignant reminder that sometimes the ultimate enemy is not the opposing force, but the passage of time itself. The T-28 now quietly resides in museums, a hulking, silent witness to a grand ambition that never found its true battlefield, a gentle giant of steel, forever frozen in a moment of history. Our next destination carries us into the chilling heart of the Cold War, a period of global tension, nuclear anxieties, and a relentless arms race between the superpowers. We journey now to the late 1950s Soviet Union, a time when innovation was often cloaked in secrecy and driven by the terrifying possibility of nuclear conflict. Here, a tank was conceived that, to my eyes, transcends mere engineering and ventures into the realm of science fiction, earning it the evocative nickname I find so fitting, the UFO tank. I speak, of course, of Object 279. Imagine the strategic landscape of the late 1950s. Both the United States and the Soviet Union possessed nuclear weapons, and the unthinkable scenario of a nuclear war was a constant, underlying fear. What kind of armored vehicle could possibly survive and operate in a post-atomic battlefield? This was the grim question that Soviet designers, working in hushed, heavily guarded facilities, sought to answer. They envisioned a tank that could not only withstand the immediate shockwave of a nuclear detonation, but also traverse the devastated, contaminated landscape that would follow. The solution they devised was unlike anything seen before or since. I can almost picture the first startled reactions upon seeing its design. A low, saucer-shaped hull, almost elliptical, giving it an undeniably futuristic, almost alien appearance. This unique, flattened, and deeply sloped armor was not merely for aesthetics. It was a deliberate choice, carefully engineered to offer maximum resistance to the immense pressures of a nuclear blast shockwave. I imagine the force of such an explosion simply glancing off its smooth, hardened surfaces, allowing the crew within to survive a cataclysmic event that would vaporize conventional tanks. It was a vision of survival in the face of ultimate destruction. But the extraordinary design did not stop there. Conventional tanks rely on 2 tracks, but Object 279, in its pursuit of unparalleled mobility across devastated terrain, was equipped with 4 sets of tracks. Picture these massive, independent track assemblies, each designed to distribute the tank's considerable weight over an enormous surface area. This gave Object 279 an almost uncanny ability to traverse landscapes that would bog down any other armored vehicle. I envision it lumbering effortlessly over deep snow, its wide tracks refusing to sink, or slowly but surely crossing treacherous swamps, its unique flotation properties keeping it from succumbing to the mire. It was designed to be an unstoppable force, capable of operating where no other tank dared to tread. And, of course, a tank designed to survive the apocalypse needed a weapon commensurate with its purpose. Object 279 was armed with a massive 130mm gun, a truly devastating piece of artillery, capable of destroying any known contemporary tank and delivering immense firepower against hardened targets. I can almost feel the ground tremble at the thought of such a weapon firing. A deafening roar echoing across a desolated landscape. A powerful assertion of capability in a world turned upside down. This tank, with its truly futuristic appearance and groundbreaking design, seemed to embody the very pinnacle of Cold War ambition and paranoia. It looked like something pulled directly from the pages of a speculative novel, a harbinger of a mechanized future. Yet, for all its revolutionary features and its undeniable visual impact, Object 279 ultimately proved to be too costly, too complex, and too impractical for mass production or widespread deployment. I imagine the intense debates, the conflicting priorities, the realization that such a specialized machine, however brilliant in concept, would strain the logistical and financial resources of even a superpower. By the early 1960s, its development was abandoned. A quiet victim of evolving strategic doctrines and the relentless pursuit of more conventional, yet still potent, designs. The UFO tank. This vision of a nuclear-resistant future now rests in a museum, a silent, elliptical monument to a world that fortunately never came to be. A whispered reminder of the fears and dreams of a bygone era. Let us now return, gently, to Sweden, to explore another fascinating chapter in its distinctive approach to tank design. One that again showcases a pragmatic yet innovative spirit. Our focus now is on the Strv 103, a vehicle so unconventional that it earned the intriguing moniker, the turretless wonder. This design emerged in the shadow of the Korean War, a conflict that deeply influenced military thinking around the globe, prompting nations to reconsider conventional wisdom about armored warfare and soldier survivability. I imagine the Swedish military strategists and engineers poring over casualty studies from the Korean War, their brows furrowed in concern. What they likely observed was a clear pattern. A significant percentage of tank casualties were due to hits on the turret, the highest and most exposed part of a conventional tank. This grim realization sparked a radical thought. What if a tank simply didn't have a turret? It was a bold question, a fundamental challenge to centuries of armored vehicle design. The answer was the Strv 103, a tank designed with a singular, overarching principle in mind: survival through a drastically low profile. Picture this machine. It stood only about 7 feet tall. I want you to imagine yourself standing next to it. It would barely reach your outstretched hand above your head. This incredibly low silhouette made it an extraordinarily difficult target to spot on the battlefield, especially when dug into a defensive position or lurking behind natural terrain. It could hug the ground, becoming almost invisible to enemy gunners. A silent predator waiting for its moment. The most striking, and indeed defining, feature of the Strv 103 was its complete lack of a traditional rotating turret. This was the daring innovation that gave it its nickname. Instead, its main gun, a powerful 105mm rifled cannon, was fixed directly to the hull of the tank. I can almost hear the murmurs of disbelief from conventional tank designers. How could it aim? They might have wondered. The ingenious solution was to use the tank's entire body as its aiming mechanism. To traverse the gun, the driver and gunner, working in concert, would steer the tank left or right using a sophisticated hydropneumatic suspension system that could also elevate or depress the front of the hull to adjust the gun's vertical aim. I imagine the intense training required for such a system, the seamless coordination between crew members, the subtle shifts of the chassis translating into precise adjustments of the gun barrel. It was an elegant, if complex, solution to the problem of aiming without a turret. This meant that the tank, in effect, pointed its entire being at the enemy. A unique and rather aggressive stance. But the innovations didn't stop there. The Struve 103 was also designed to be amphibious, capable of crossing water obstacles with relative ease. I picture it silently sliding into a lake or river, a canvas screen rising around its perimeter to provide buoyancy, its tracks propelling it through the water, emerging on the far bank ready for action. This added a layer of strategic flexibility, allowing it to bypass conventional crossing points and surprise an enemy. And in another stroke of unconventional brilliance, it could drive backward at full speed. This might seem like a minor detail, but imagine the tactical advantages it could fire. Retreat quickly from a dangerous position without needing to turn around and expose its more vulnerable rear. And then reposition itself, all while maintaining its low profile. It was a true master of the unexpected maneuver. For all its clever design and forward-thinking features, the Struve 103 ultimately faced limitations in practice. Its fixed gun, while offering a low profile, restricted its ability to engage multiple targets quickly or fire effectively while on the move, especially over uneven terrain. It was a master of defensive ambush and specific attack angles, but less adaptable in a fluid, rapidly changing battlefield scenario. And so, like many of its eccentric brethren, the Struve 103, despite being produced in significant numbers and serving for decades in the Swedish army, never actually saw combat. It remained a testament to Swedish ingenuity and a fascinating example of how a nation can forge its own path in military design, even if that path leads to a turretless wonder that quietly guards its homeland, a silent, low-slung sentinel. As we gently conclude our individual tales of these peculiar armored leviathans, I find myself reflecting upon a common thread that weaves through all their stories, a shared destiny that binds them together in the quiet halls of military history. It's a somewhat poignant truth that, despite the ingenuity, the desperation, the vast resources, and the audacious dreams poured into their creation, none of these truly weird tanks we've discussed actually saw combat. Not a single one of them rolled into a real battle, faced an enemy in anger, or fulfilled the ultimate destructive purpose for which it was designed. I imagine the quiet disappointment that must have settled upon their creators, the engineers, strategists, and politicians who championed them. To pour so much effort, so many late nights, so much hope into a machine, only for it to remain untested in the crucible of war, must have been a bittersweet experience. Their reasons for this shared fate are varied, yet they coalesce into a series of compelling lessons in military engineering and the unpredictable nature of conflict. One primary reason, as we've explored, was simply impractical weight. Consider the American T-28 Super Heavy tank, a monstrous 95 to 100 tons of steel. While its armor was formidable, its immense mass rendered it a logistical nightmare. Bridges would buckle under its weight, roads would crumble, and its slow, almost glacial speed of 8 miles per hour made it strategically unwieldy. The Soviet Object 279, with its 4 sets of tracks and elliptical, nuclear blast-resistant hull, was also an incredibly heavy beast. While designed to traverse unimaginable terrain, its sheer bulk made it a monumental challenge to deploy and maintain in a real-world scenario. The weight, intended to be a strength, became a practical liability, chaining these titans to test fields rather than battlegrounds. Then there were the manufacturing costs. The Object 279 in particular, with its complex, multi-tracked suspension and unique, nuclear-hardened hull, would have been exorbitantly expensive to produce in the numbers required for a large-scale conflict. I imagine the budget meetings, the grim faces of finance ministers, as they looked at the projected costs of equipping an army with such a technologically advanced, specialized, and labor-intensive machine. Sometimes, brilliance comes at a price too steep for even the wealthiest nations. Many of these designs also suffered from being fundamentally untested concepts in a rapidly evolving field. The Strv 74, with its rocking instability when firing its powerful gun, represented an inherent design flaw that, while perhaps manageable, added an unpredictable element to combat. The Bob Semple tank, a magnificent testament to improvisation, was simply too crude, too vulnerable, and too slow to withstand the rigors of modern mechanized warfare. And even the ingenious Strv 103, for all its low profile and unique aiming system, presented tactical limitations when it came to rapid target engagement or maneuvering in dynamic combat situations. These were bold experiments, and like many experiments, their practical limitations often became apparent only through extensive and ultimately non-combat trials. And sometimes, it was simply a matter of bad timing. The T-28, for instance, was designed with a very specific threat in mind, the Siegfried Line. By the time the prototypes were ready for deployment, the war in Europe had ended. The formidable fortifications had been breached, and the need for such a specialized, heavy breakthrough tank evaporated almost overnight. I think of this as a quiet irony of history, where the very success of a war effort renders a cutting-edge weapon obsolete before it can even be bloodied. So, these unusual machines, these mechanical dreams and ambitious concepts, remained primarily in test fields. I picture them now, perhaps resting under the open sky, their steel frames slowly weathering, their paint fading, their mighty guns pointed silently at nothing in particular. Some found their way into museums, becoming static exhibits, silent guardians of a forgotten era of innovation. They are the quiet giants and quirky curiosities of military history, never having known the thunder of battle, but leaving behind a much more subtle, yet profound, legacy of lessons learned and paths not taken. Their very lack of combat experience is, in itself, a powerful story. As we muse upon the shared fate of these fascinating, often peculiar tanks, I believe there are deeper lessons to be gleaned, insights into the very nature of military engineering and the human condition itself. Each of these designs, in its own unique way, served as a steel-clad mirror, reflecting the profound fears and strategic anxieties of its specific era. It's a remarkable illustration of how the perceived threats of a given time can directly, and sometimes dramatically, shape the technology developed to counter them. Let us gently revisit these connections. Consider, for a moment, the Bob Semple tank. Its very existence speaks volumes about the palpable fear of a Japanese invasion of New Zealand during the early, dark days of World War II. I imagine the island nation, thousands of miles from the main theaters of conflict, feeling incredibly vulnerable, watching the news of Japanese expansion across the Pacific with growing dread. With no tanks available from traditional allies, the fear of an armored assault on their shores, however distant or improbable it might have seemed to others, spurred them to create something. The Bob Semple was not just a tank. It was a physical manifestation of a nation's collective anxiety. A desperate attempt to create a deterrent, however crude, against a terrifying, unforeseen future. It whispered of self-preservation in the face of profound isolation. Then, shift your focus to the immense American T-28. This monumental machine was a direct response to the perceived and very real threat of the formidable German fortifications along the Siegfried Line in Europe. I can almost hear the strategists grimly discussing the immense casualties that would be incurred trying to breach these concrete bastions with conventional forces. The T-28, therefore, was born from a fear of entrenched, static defenses, a fear of being bogged down in a brutal, attritional struggle. Its colossal size, its impenetrable armor, and its powerful gun were all designed to alleviate that specific fear, to smash through the unyielding will of an enemy fortress. It was a tangible expression of the immense offensive power required to overcome a truly formidable defensive barrier. And finally, consider Object 279, the Soviet UFO tank. This was perhaps the most visceral response to the most terrifying fear of the Cold War nuclear annihilation. I imagine the pervasive anxiety of a world living under the shadow of atomic bombs, the constant threat of global conflict escalating into an unprecedented catastrophe. Object 279, with its elliptical, shockwave-resistant hull and its ability to traverse devastated landscapes, was a direct, almost desperate, attempt to design for the unthinkable. It was a vehicle born from the chilling possibility of nuclear war, a metallic hope for survival in a world transformed by atomic fire. Its very form spoke of a future that humanity prayed would never arrive. What these examples powerfully showcase, to my mind, is how military innovation is almost inherently reactive. It responds, often with great urgency and sometimes with remarkable creativity, to perceived threats. It's a constant dance between the known dangers and the imagined horrors. Each tank, in its unique and sometimes quirky design, tells us a story not just about engineering, but about the specific anxieties and strategic doctrines that prevailed during its conception. They are historical markers, quiet monuments to the fears that once gripped nations and spurred their finest minds to conceive of extraordinary, and sometimes delightfully strange, solutions. It's a testament to the fact that while the machines themselves may gather dust, the lessons embedded within their steel structures continue to whisper across the ages, guiding our understanding of human conflict and adaptation. As our quiet contemplation deepens, I find myself musing on a particularly intriguing aspect of these peculiar armored vehicles, the delicate, often blurred, line that separates true genius from what might, at first glance, appear to be a touch of madness. It's a fascinating dichotomy that runs through the history of innovation, especially when driven by the intense pressures of military necessity. These weird tanks offer us a compelling look into this very human phenomenon, where audacious ideas sometimes soar ahead of their time, and other times are destined for quiet obscurity from their very inception. Consider, for instance, thus, those ideas that were, arguably, ahead of their time. The Strv 103, our turretless wonder, springs immediately to mind. Its drastically low profile, a mere 7 feet tall, was a direct and intelligent response to the vulnerability of conventional tank turrets. This focus on survivability through stealth and reduced target visibility was a concept that gained much more traction in later decades of military design. I imagine the Swedish engineers, perhaps facing skepticism, nonetheless holding firm to their vision, understanding that sometimes the most effective defense is to simply not be hit at all. Its emphasis on hydropneumatic suspension for aiming and its amphibious capabilities were also forward-thinking, demonstrating a profound understanding of battlefield flexibility and crew protection. It was a design that anticipated future trends, even if its specific execution proved challenging in its own era. Similarly, Object 279, with its elliptical, nuclear blast-resistant armor, tackled a hypothetical but terrifying future scenario with truly groundbreaking engineering. While impractical for its time, the very concept of designing for extreme environmental resilience was a precursor to specialized vehicles for hazardous conditions. These were whispers of the future, echoing in the present. Then there are those ideas, like Bob Semple's, that, to be entirely frank, were perhaps doomed from the start in terms of conventional military effectiveness. The corrugated iron armor, the tractor chassis, the multiple Bren guns. It was never going to compete with purpose-built tanks from major industrial powers. Yet, I find an immense amount of creative genius in its conception, not in its technological sophistication, but in its sheer audacity and resourcefulness. It was an idea born from raw necessity, a bold, almost defiant act of creation when conventional options were non-existent. It showed an incredible spirit of making do, of transforming the mundane into a tool of defense. It was a testament to the human capacity for improvisation under duress, a kind of brilliance that manifests not in complexity, but in the simple, urgent act of building something, anything, to face a threat. This kind of creativity, born from the gut, is a different kind of genius, perhaps more poignant and human than pure engineering prowess. What this journey truly highlights is how military desperation often leads to the most unorthodox experiments, when the stakes are life and death, when national survival hangs in the balance. The boundaries of what is considered sensible or conventional often dissolve. I imagine the intense pressure on designers and strategists to deliver solutions, any solutions, that might give them an edge. This pressure can unlock truly imaginative ideas, pushing engineers to explore avenues that might otherwise be dismissed as too radical, too expensive, or simply too strange. It's in these moments of profound crisis that the human mind, in its quest for survival and victory, can produce the most extraordinary and sometimes wonderfully eccentric creations. So, as we gently conclude this scene, I want to leave you with the thought that this thin line between genius and madness is, perhaps, not a line at all, but rather a fluid, shifting landscape. What appears outlandish today might be seen as visionary tomorrow, and what seems utterly impractical might, in a moment of desperate need, become the only viable option. These weird tanks are not just machines. They are reflections of the human spirit pushed to its limits, daring to dream, to build, and to innovate, often against overwhelming odds, in the quiet pursuit of an imagined future. As our quiet journey through the unusual annals of armored history draws to a gentle close, I find myself contemplating the enduring legacy of these weird tanks. Though they were, by and large, failures in the conventional terms of combat deployment, never having fired a shot in anger on a true battlefield, their stories are far from inconsequential. Indeed, I believe they offer us profound lessons, reminding us that progress, in all its forms, is rarely a straight line. It often comes through trial, through error, and sometimes through a touch of beautiful absurdity. Consider how these seemingly outlandish concepts quietly influenced later engineering. The Struer V103's pioneering work in low-profile design, for instance, undoubtedly contributed to a broader understanding of survivability through reduced visibility, a principle that continues to inform modern stealth technology and vehicle design. Its hydropneumatic suspension system, while unique in its application for aiming, paved the way for advanced active suspension systems in future tanks, improving mobility and firing accuracy. Even the Object 279, for all its impracticality, pushed the boundaries of what was conceivable for armor protection and off-road mobility, concepts that continued to evolve in more conventional heavy tank designs. The lessons learned, the data gathered, the manufacturing challenges overcome or not overcome all fed into the collective knowledge base, subtly shaping the trajectory of future armored vehicles. These tanks, in their very existence, serve as powerful reminders that progress is rarely born perfect. It is, more often than not, a messy, iterative process of experimentation. I imagine the countless hours spent on the drawing board, the late-night discussions, the test failures, and the small, hard-won successes that characterize any true innovation. Each of these strange machines represents a hypothesis, an attempt to solve a problem, a question posed in steel and fire. And even if the answer wasn't a resounding yes for battlefield deployment, the process of asking the question itself contributed to our understanding of what is possible and what is perhaps not. They teach us that sometimes we must embrace the absurd, the unconventional, the seemingly illogical, to stumble upon new insights and push the boundaries of what we thought we knew. Today, these weird tanks do not thunder across battlefields, but they live on in quieter, yet still significant ways. Many of them reside in museums, silent giants resting under soft lights, their unique forms captivating the imaginations of visitors. I imagine children peering up at their strange shapes, their eyes wide with wonder, perhaps sparking a lifelong curiosity about history or engineering. They also exist in the digital realms of video games, where virtual commanders can, at last, unleash their peculiar powers, giving them a form of combat life they never experienced in reality. And most importantly, they live on as cautionary tales and inspiring anecdotes in military history, whispered from one generation of engineers to the next. They remind us that even in the most serious endeavors, like the design of instruments of war, there is room for the unconventional, for the bold experiment, for the slightly off-kilter idea. They are a testament to the boundless creativity of the human mind, even when confronted by the direst circumstances. And so, as our quiet journey ends tonight, I invite you to carry with you the image of these unique machines. Let them be a gentle reminder that every grand achievement, every leap forward, is often built upon a foundation of countless trials, many errors, and perhaps a few truly weird and wonderful dreams. May their silent stories bring you a sense of calm reflection, and perhaps a peaceful night's rest. Good night.